Yeah.
Because I don't want to be late.
Be on your feet because it's so windy.
I promised we would be on time. I think Dean cut off there for a second.
Yeah, mine's showing 25, 26, gusting to 30.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, 26 gusting to 30 here.
Damn.
I guarantee you some of those gusts are more than 30 out there.
Oh, that's always the case.
Dude,
yeah,
that's always the case.
I mean,
all right. What else has been going on? I got your topic, Dean. We'll start with that after I set up the show and everything. And
yeah, got a shout out to the guys at Gulf Coast Products too, man. I was
I'll write
all
that
about
down.
the Wade sling this week.
The Wade, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Tim and Jason.
Yeah, those guys are great. In fact, they're going to be my boat ramp confessional today. Where did you? What's that?
I just interesting. But you never know what's going to happen with the boat ramp confessionals.
Oh, this is a good one. Coastal fishing gear. Hold on, where is it? So it's not my coast. I got to remember to do that. It's mycoastoutdoors.com. No, it's not.
Coastal fishing gear, Dean.
Coastalfishinggear.com. Coastal fishing.
Yeah, CFG.
Yeah.
I knew it was Gulf coastal fishing something.
Yeah, we'll get it. Well, I'll let you.
You knew it was fishing gear. You knew it was on the coast. I mean, there we go.
It's in there. It's in there.
We're close.
I'll let you give them a shout out when we get rolling or when we get to that. Hey, Coastal Fishing Gear is online right now. How about that? What's up, fellas?
Yeah, and they're correcting Dean already. takes a little bit of a load off of me.
We got people are watching, Dean.
We need all the help I can get.
Yeah. Do you have anything else before we start recording?
No, just I mean, I got some good reports from the last 3 days, of course, all which went out the window with today's situation. But
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll get started then, unless you have something, Scott.
No.
All right, here we go. All right, welcome in. I suck. That's the lead. You never bury the lead, right? I really suck. Maybe not as much as I thought I did, but I do suck. There's no question about that.
You sucked twice today.
I sucked twice today, and I will explain that shortly. Took my guy Tim from coastalfishinggear.com, Wade Wright, out, and he's got quite the boat ramp confessional, and I'll get to the fishing experience that we had. Welcome in for everybody watching us record this podcast live, and everybody listening on wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe. That would be iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You know the drill. You know the drill. Everywhere that you can get a podcast, you can get the Bite Me podcast, and we appreciate that. Don't forget to join the Bite Me group page as well, because the Bite Me group page is where we get a lot of the topics, today, in fact, and we'll get to those right away. Let's not piddle around here. We got Dean Thomas in. We're starting right on time, which is a good indicator that Caleb is not able to join us today. But we got Captain Dean Thomas down in Aransas Pass joining us today. Captain Scott Null. Man, smooth as silk, Scott. Smooth as silk, today's podcast. But our guy, we love him. He is what he is. He's out at the Aggie baseball game, so you can't criticize the guy for watching the Aggies. But Captain Dean, I'm going to start with you because I'm going to get to why I suck. Let me tell you why I suck in just a minute. But you've had quite the week, and I think there's something that we can maybe kick around here, at least get the whys and the details here. You went kayak fishing, then you went wade fishing, then you went drift fishing. What was the story there, my man?
Oh man, it's just some good long days on the water. I had been away for about a week, and yeah, went out kayak fishing Saturday. Had great conditions. Long day. I mean, stuck it out. Took peanut butter jelly sandwich and had lunch, and I mean, fished the duration of the day. And
Mm-hmm.
then Sunday had a really cool wade fishing trip. We went to St. Joe Island to the shoreline, and
Mm-hmm.
we strolled up and down the shoreline over there. Another good long day. Covered really was didn't cover so much water, but it was interesting, just the pattern of the day. Started out slow, stuck with it, had a really good flurry of action in the middle, and then typical trout fishing. It was like flipping a switch, man. They just went from every cast to non-existent. So it was pretty good. And then yesterday we had super high tide, really perfect winds for drifting, and hit a lot of really cool spots. And it's Monday, nobody's on the water, covered a lot of areas without too much traffic. And just, it's interesting to compare all that. In the kayak, it's back in the ultra shallows, in the corners, in the little pockets where very little traffic gets to. And there was redfish, there was a lot of reds, but the as favorable as the tide was, and as favorable as the conditions were, I could see redfish. They would chase, they would follow, they would come charging at a top water from 10 feet, but they wouldn't bite it.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting 3 nice keepers to hit, but I probably watched 20 that would charge at it and not hit. And then whenever we were wade fishing, we had high tide that day also, started walking up shallow, throwing top waters, and it was the same thing. The reds would charge at it, and they just didn't want to eat it. And so in that area, it's super flats. It's on the shoreline of
Mm-hmm.
St. Joe Island, and it's this big flat that extends off the shoreline, and it's like walking on a sidewalk. It's beautiful sandy bottom. You can just walk for miles over there. So we went out to the edge and switched to soft plastics and just started catching speckled trout. And
Mm-hmm.
they weren't fast and furious, but when they hit, it was a good trout. They were all pretty thick fish over there. But it was kind of let up. You'd get one here, 15 minutes, another one. And then all of a sudden we had this little flurry of action for about an hour where they were just hitting. And then like flipping a switch, man, it was like 2 at a time till they were just done.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it was interesting. We changed colors. We had time to compare and contrast a lot of different stuff. So it was every day's a learning experience. I don't care how many years you've been out there beating up that water. Every day you figure it out. And
So on the kayaking to wade fishing to drifting, that was just choice. Then you were just exploring.
yes. And I had some friends from the neighborhood where we were out, where I can be creative, not a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I could just kind of get an idea and say, man, let's try this. Let's go do something. And so it was just hitting a variety of options and working it over and drifting on the skiff yesterday. I mean, it was crazy high tide. I mean, it's up in the bushes, so I could run my skiff way back up against the shorelines and commit to long drifts, like a mile of drifting.
Mm-hmm.
And we stuck with the top waters. And so as far as the rhythm of the day goes, it was similar all three, where you would expect the early morning bite to really be good, but it was very slow. And from 10:30 to about 1 o'clock is when they just got in a good mood.
So Scott, I know you've had your plate full lately, but just for the sake of our listeners, I mean, I'm sure they're like, okay, so what do I get out of that? Because the winds are crazy, the tides are high. I mean, as you're listening to Dean here, I've got a couple of thoughts, but don't trust me because I suck. So what were your thoughts on from what you're hearing from Dean? Trust me, I'll get to that.
I like that kind of fishing, man. Just go out and try something. Yeah, we've talked about that a lot on here. when the weather's crazy, it's hard to pattern fish. It's hard to have something that's working day to day and something you can count on. When you leave the house, man, weatherman might be right, might be wrong. More than likely, he's wrong. Unless he says it's windy, then he's probably right. But you can get out there and just try something new. Go try new places. Go try, like what Dean was talking about there, man. Just go have fun with it. If the reds aren't working, go chase some trout. The trout aren't working, go back up there and go try some reds in a different place. Disappear off into the lakes or something.
And how we've talked over the last couple podcasts about the changing conditions of late March and April. We had different wind direction on all of those days. So Saturday was a very brisk north wind. And so I paddled straight into it and then worked my way back. But the day before, it was south wind. So I was dealing with very different conditions from the previous day. And then when we were wade fishing on the St. Joe shoreline, we had an east wind in the morning, which is beautiful. It protects it. You got the wind at your back for casting. And over the course of the day, the wind changed to completely south. You could just watch the boat sitting on the anchor just swing and change directions as the wind changed. And then yesterday, as we're out drifting, we had very much north wind to start out with, which shifted to the east throughout the day. So it's been a variety of directions.
Now it's northeast at 900 miles an hour.
Yeah. Okay, so it's perfect that you guys set me up like that, because what I'm gathering from you, Dean, is you were with some good friends that have fished with you before. There was no real pressure, to try to find this or find that. Correct?
Exactly.
Right. That helps. And so I took Tim Stamps out from Wade Right on Saturday, and I always kind of sort of characterize my expertise as a fisherman as better than your average fisherman usually, but not even in the same realm as you guys, because I'm out a lot. I'm out every week. But here's the thing. I hadn't been out in 3 weeks because I had an event at A&M that we talked about on the podcast. And then I had 2 weeks of wedding stuff. And then there was real bad weather. So it was 3 weeks, I think, or maybe even more, but that I hadn't been out on the water. So I was just spitballing, like totally spitballing. And so you guys said, talking about the wind and trying different things. Okay, so Tim and I, we got out there a little before 8:30. I was waiting for the falling tide about 10. And we went out there and we waited. We drifted. We waited on the north shoreline, on the south shoreline. We went to the west side of the bay. We went to the east side of the bay. We went to a back lake looking for reds like you're talking about. Then we were drifting in the middle of the bay. And the wind started out from the northeast, then it switched to the northwest. All right, no big deal. Then it switched to the southeast. Then it switched back to the northeast. At one point, we were drifting, and it was a lighter wind at that point, and we felt the wind behind us. And I turned to Tim. I said, I think the wind's in front of us now. As we're drifting, it shifted. And so we literally did an about face and started casting the other way. We were drifting in one direction, and then we're like, all right, let's turn around. So we started drifting the other way. And we had one bite the whole day into the afternoon, obviously. And I'm like, it was a bad day. It made me feel a little better that our guy, Patrick Gardner, was actually in a tournament, and he told me the same thing. He said Saturday was a mess and a real struggle. But man, I'm telling you, on those days, it's almost like I need counseling. I mean, it's it's not you, it's me. I mean, both you guys. Scott, I'll start with you. I know we've all had bad days. This one was brutal because I thought I had it dialed in. We talked about it in last week's podcast, but I hadn't been on the water in a long time. And so I'm like, we got back to my trailer, and I'm like, let's open beer, man. Let's do something to get going. But Scott, that was one of my worst trips in a long time.
It happens, man. I mean, there's days, I mean, I'll have it figured out. I mean, yeah, it's all good. I'm excited to be at the ramp in the morning. I got a customer and everything's great. And man, the fish were there yesterday. They were hammering it. Get there, start pulling, and the water just looks dead. And then it's time to go do something different. Go, completely flip the switch and go to a completely different area and act like you know what you're doing. And sometimes it works out. But there are days though where, I mean, no matter where you go, what you do, how hard you try, you just don't see the fish. They're just, I don't know where the hell they go. Dean says they go subterranean sometimes.
I think they did over at East Matagorda. But Dean, I kept telling myself, I was driving home that night, and I was like, I bet you if I was here last week, I'd have figured something more out. I mean, the repetitiveness, the circle of friends, all that stuff. Maybe not, because like Scott said, sometimes it's just that bad. But you were scavenging in different ways. That's why I thought it was a good lead into to that story. But I mean, it was like brutal.
And I mean, you'll kick yourself until you get back out there. That just makes you want to go again. It makes you want to correct the wrongs that were done to you on that day. And it does happen. I mean, it's part of the game. It's just the way it is. Yesterday morning, as we were drifting, that's the way my day started, man. It was brutal. For hours, we didn't get a bite. I mean, we took off early before the sun came up, and, we caught few little fish along the way, but the big ones didn't hit until 11. So, but I just stuck with the same program. I didn't shift gears. I just kept going a little. As the tide was coming in, I go a little further up on the flat, set up a longer drift, and just keep working it. There's a lot of ways to approach that. You can keep sticking with the program that you planned for the day. Or you can get an idea and shift gears and, go try to do something else. But when the wind turns 180 on you,
while we're drifting,
yeah, that's, that
we
kind
just
of
turned around.
That forces you.
We just
really,
did an about face.
That's kind of, you don't have you have to do something at that point. Ours was shifting around at angles. It didn't do a 180 on me, but it's part of the game, man. It's going to happen. When I have days like that, it just sends me back to the drawing board, makes me rethink the program, consider what the wind at. And so speaking of the wind and what happens when the wind changes? The wind creates current in the bay, and we had pretty good incoming tide, but the wind still pushes a lot of water around. The wind creates current. The wind will make water flow around islands at a different angle. It'll push water across flats. The bait fish, all of those things get disturbed. They get in between ideas. They move around, so things become inconsistent.
Yeah,
that's the deal with March and April. When it changes directions, the bait move. We didn't see any active life in the water. I mean, we saw mullet. We saw when we were walking up in the shallows, we were kicking some shrimp. There were some shrimp popping out of the grass, but the wind moves the currents, and the currents dictate what the bait fish do. The big fish follow those. And when it's changing dramatically in a short time or every other day, you can't count on where you were yesterday.
Yeah. And Scott, that's why I wanted to get the topic, so to speak, out of this me sucking so bad is what I actually wrote it down while Dane was talking. It went, because I remember it went from the northwest to the northeast to the south to the northeast to the southeast. In the course of us being on the water, including that one time, to what Dean said, I mean, the water was never really great. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. It was dark. Could that have been part of the effect?
Yeah. I was going to ask Dean, did you keep any fish? Did you have to keep any?
I kept one or two each day, just a dinner, but we released most of everything.
Did you check their stomachs?
I did not really pay any attention to that.
Yeah. When I'm having a hard time, and I do manage to pull one, I'll go ahead, a lot of days I'll go ahead and keep that one.
Mhm.
And then I check the stomach, and that tells me a whole lot. I mean, it like on redfish when they're acting weird and they're not eating and they don't, they're nothing's happening right, and they're just not reacting to lures in the right way, or even a
Yeah.
fly. I say probably half of the time or more when I do check their stomach, it's full of little bitty crabs.
And I was fixing to
And
say that without even looking, it's just that time of year where
yep, it's the
everything
time for
in the
baby
bay
crabs.
is
Mhm.
tiny and they're hatching. And
Yep.
the drift socks, when we would pull them up, they were just loaded with the little shells, the little, and I
Yeah.
forget what those little creatures called, but they were just loaded with little tiny little crustaceans. And yeah, without looking in their belly, it's just that time for a lot of tiny shrimp, tiny minnows, and and yeah, it's just not
Um,
an abundance of life in the water. I was even telling the guys yesterday, I was like, the areas when you go back in those corners, it can look like a mullet circus back there some days. It's noisy with mullet hopping. It's just
Mhm.
you're looking over your shoulder constantly. What was that? But there was none of that taking place. As we were drifting, you'd see the flashes, you'd see
Mhm.
them rolling, you knew they were there, but they were just lazy.
yeah, Saturday, I guess it was Saturday night, we went down to Stephen Plant's place, had dinner at the end of the road here at Lane Road, and we had the lights on the pier. Nobody was fishing it, but we just had the lights on. Walked out there on the pier, and it was just hundreds and hundreds of little bitty dime-sized crabs in the lights. It's just
Mhm.
lots and lots of them. So if I had to guess, that's when redfish have an abundance of one kind of food, they tend to zero in on it, and it's almost like they get blinders onto everything else. They don't want anything but that one type of food. Sometimes it's little shrimp, sometimes it's little crabs, and it seems like when it's little crabs, that's the hardest time to catch redfish.
Yeah. Yeah. Which leads to the boat ramp confessional. All right. So here's the best part of all, making a bad day worse. There will be a happy ending. Okay. But so I'm all excited. I got all my stuff good to go. I hadn't fished in so long, as I mentioned. Tim was real excited too. He hadn't fished. He's got a lot of obligations with his kids. So he actually did a video, which I think posted on our website, but certainly on his Instagram and his Facebook page. Tim Stamps from Wade Wright. He of like his boxes were all set up just right. All these baits, a big giant tackle box. He had his bag and everything. So I pull up to the ramp, and Tim is just kind of casting into the channel there, waiting for me. He was like 5 minutes ahead of me, just making sure his gear's all good. I mean, we are pumped. Like, the feeling. We all have the feeling. We're geared up. Let's go. We're gonna kill them today. God bless their parents, and and we're just good to go. So we get load up the boat, get on the boat, head down the canal. I start casting. We're fishing for about a good. No, I think we waited first. So we're waiting. We're waiting and everything. Right before we get into the wade, he looks at me. He goes, "God dog it." I said, "What's wrong?" He left his entire tackle box on the dock at the ramp, like his entire 4 boxes high, at least $1,000 worth of stuff. I mean, top waters, cork, everything we all have. The whole thing. He left right there at the dock when I launched the boat. And I'm like, well, we can go back. What? No, I'll call him. What time they open? So he starts calling. Didn't have a signal. We didn't have a signal for about an hour. So we wait. I give him all my stuff, obviously, and so he's good to go. We're fishing. He goes, hey, I'll get it later. Okay, I'll keep calling. So he keeps calling him. Finally, we have like a half signal, and he starts asking the question. Phone goes out. So he's like, so we're moving to another area. And he's like losing his mind because that's a lot of stuff. I mean, like I said, it was at least $1,000 worth of stuff. And so we finally gets a hold of these people right there at the crab trap where we put in. And then the kid answers, no, I don't see anything. He goes out there, he looks around, he goes, I don't see anything. Oh, man. Well, look here, look there. I don't see anything, nothing. I put it right there. Nope, nothing. So we fish, and he's about every 10 minutes, he's like, Man, that pisses me off. Like he was not having a good day. He was just like, we're fishing and we weren't catching fish, as I mentioned, and we're moving around and we go to the next stop and he gets some more stuff, some more gear, and he's like, I can't believe that happened. I can't who takes an entire tackle box? So finally we get, after the day is over and we're just licking our wounds, we get back there. He walks in there as I'm loading up the boat, ask the people again. No, I haven't seen anything. So finally one guy comes out from the back and he goes, yeah, did you set it right there? And we're like, yeah. And he goes, did it have popping corks in it? And he goes, yeah. No, I haven't seen it. Haven't seen it. Oh, really? Oh, really? Then another guy comes out and says, you know what? There was a boat that launched right after you. I think that's their truck right there. So Tim writes down a note, puts it on the windshield, tries to, it tells them, thankfully, hopefully you got my stuff, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. We're sitting back at my trailer, drinking beer, having a good time, just talking, whatever, playing with Gibson. He drives home. I drive home that night. And we're thinking, well, we think that guy took it, and wasn't saying anything. So the next morning, I get a text from Tim. Somebody did pick it up, put it in their boat, saved it, saw the note, called Tim. The happy ending is he actually gave him a bunch of Wade Right gear, gave him a net, gave him a box, gave him a sling, all this other stuff, hats, stickers. So I guess the moral to the story is they're actually, fishermen are a different breed, man. Fishermen are a different. The guys in that boat absolutely knew this is important. This is expensive. And so they fished all day and ended up getting, I think he met him in the Academy parking lot. I retweeted his video, but boy, that was a brutal day, including, for the most part, he thought he lost about $1,000 worth of gear.
Man, that is a butt kicker. But, hey, man, it's good to know that there's good people out there that still will do the right thing. And just to, I'll go ahead on and make mine. I mean, I got to throw this.
He's scratching his head. Oh, I guess I got to do this.
And mine, it has a happy ending also, because I only live 5 minutes from the launch. So Saturday morning, I was all fired up going kayak fishing. The night before, had everything in a pile, even right there by the door. Put everything in the truck, loaded up, and I was like 45 minutes before sunrise, maybe an hour. I was early. Even went by the taco shop, grabbed some food, man. I was like going for the duration.
I love that.
And it was foggy. And so when I drove down the causeway, it just got darker and darker. And I was like just slow rolling it. And so I pulled up to the launch and I'm standing there kind of just walking around the truck and looked in the back of the truck. Had everything except my fishing poles. So my fishing poles were sitting right there in the corner in the little pile that I left them in. Put everything else in the truck. So excited, much like your day, all fired up. But the good thing about it, it was so early and it was so foggy. And it's like,
you're probably a blessing. Yeah, it's probably a blessing.
It's less than 10 minutes back to the house. So I came back, and then I actually came back and grabbed me some lights because it was still foggy. I was just going to take and light it up real good. And yeah, had to come back and get my fishing poles.
Man, you lose gear like that. It's just brutal.
But luckily,
Scott, I know
I hadn't set anything on the ground. I was just standing there, kind of walking around in circles, looking around, and I was like, there ain't no fishing poles sticking up in this truck.
I think the funny thing is you're just standing there walking around, like just wandering aimlessly.
Yeah, I was just slow rolling it, man, just taking life easy. And out of the corner of my eye, there was no fishing poles where they're supposed to be. And I was like, oh well.
We had a similar morning like that one time, me and you. when got to the ramp, there was no fishing poles in the back of the truck. You'd had them standing up in your milk crate when we left your house.
Oh, I've left
And
them leaning against the tree in the yard. Yeah.
that morning, that particular morning, we got there and you said, "Damn, my poles fell out. They must have fallen out somewhere." So we slow rolled all the way back to the house, checking the sides of the road. Again, we were early; it was dark, and we were looking. I was expecting fully to see a smashed rod and reel in the middle of the road somewhere.
Somebody
We
ran
make
over
it all the
yeah.
way back to his house, and we still hadn't found him. Still hadn't seen him. Well, somebody must have picked him up. We roll into his driveway, and they're hanging from the tree.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they came out while he's driving off.
Driving out of the driveway, they hung up in the oak tree limbs. And
how many?
There's these. It was a couple of them, and they were just hanging there.
And if for some reason I tend to forget stuff when I'm kayaking, I've got to the water without my paddle, which, I mean, those are showstoppers. You know, there's something that you can go with, like, I could live without that.
Showstoppers. I got to remember that.
But I've gotten down there and it's like no paddle, no fish. But when I go in the boat, but you know, the boat requires the boat's hanging in the slip.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to remember.
I told Scott about the time I was fishing with Captain Mickey, and I caught a fish, and I set my rod down, I took the fish off, whatever, released it, put it in the box, and I turned around to grab my rod, and I went, huh. It was right there. My rod was right there. And I kind of like sheepish, I almost didn't say anything, but I'm glad I did. I kind of sheepishly looked at Captain Mickey and I said, "Did you grab my rod?" He goes, "Did it fall out?" You know how Mickey is. I said, "It may have." I said it right here. I should have known better. Should have put it in the holder. And he goes, "Everybody stop." And he start casting that way. And we start casting, and he put something big on his rod, and we start casting into the water, trying to snag my rod. I'll be damned. Snagged it. We snagged the rod. I didn't think we had any chance. And it was Mickey, of course, who snagged it and pulled up my rod. And I just like, yeah, I think I'm going to have to rinse this one off when I get home. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, that one needs a full cleaning.
That one might need a whole cleaning. All right, but I'm going to ask you guys a very important question. So kind of start thinking about this as we go to this topic, because there's some new regulations that really mostly affect offshore or near shore, kind of understanding the new saltwater fishing regulations. But what I'm going to ask you guys, and I want you to start thinking about it, and everybody watching live on my YouTube channel can weigh in as well. After we talk about these regulations, I'm going to ask Captain Scott and Captain Dean if you could change one thing, one rule, one law, one something with our fishing rules and regulations, what would it be? But in the meantime, so these are the changes to the 2023-24 statewide recreational fishing by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission. And Scott, I think they become effective September 1st, if I'm not mistaken. But you can add typically September 1st, right? Yeah.
Right.
You can add short fin mako to the list of prohibited shark species for recreational and commercial fishing. Requires anglers to use. It requires anglers. We'll get to it. You'll have your shot.
That's going to cut in on. Yeah, that's going to cut in.
All those mako you catch.
All the makos.
Require anglers to use descending devices when a fish exhibits the bloating signs or whatever, and match Federal Descent Act requirements. And you're going to lower the bag limit of cobia to one fish per day per angler. This is sort of a thought starter. I want to get your thoughts on this, both of you guys. Captain Dean, I'll start with you. But then I want to get there are a lot of things that we would change. We talk about it here. But what do you think on these things right here, Dean?
I mean, it's interesting on the cobia, and I guess the numbers dictate the rules that they want to change. The thing about the cobia is, of course, when you find one, you find 10 or 20 more, and that's, I mean, that you got to abide by the laws. You know, they come and go, and there's a lot of times that they seem kind of stringent, but there's a lot of people out there pursuing them. And if you want people to be or fish to be there for future generations, you have to be conservative about that. But you know, don't always, and Kobe are very seasonal here too, you know. So when you get a chance, you know, to get that, but I mean, the rules are there for a reason, you know. The snapper regulations, which, you know, the snapper that come up and are bloated, if you're not skilled in deflating them, those fish don't survive. You know, that's just the simple facts of that. If people are skilled in deflating their bladders, and I'm not familiar with the device, I mean, I don't know how technical
It's
that
pretty
is.
cool. Yeah, it's a pretty cool little deal. It's almost like a BOGO grip. You hook it onto their lip and you drop them down, and then you give it a little yank, and it opens up and lets them go at a depth.
I was just going to say, it goes. You let them down a pretty good ways, right?
Yeah,
so
you drop them back down.
They decompress.
Yeah,
right.
They compress.
So Scott, you do a lot more nearshore fishing than I do. What are your thoughts on these?
I really like that one. It doesn't say anything about specifically snapper, which I like, because sitting out at the jetties, one day in particular last year, the guys were fishing the end of the jetties, and the end of our jetties are pretty deep, and they were catching bull reds out there, and of course bringing them up, turning them loose, and there was a string of floating bloated bull reds going off into the distance. I went and got a couple of them, deflated them, and sent them back. Tried to with a couple others. You know, I was on redfish patrol that day, just kind of picking fish up.
Yeah,
these guys were just, you know, not a care in the world
catching
about
them
it,
and
just tossing
tossing
them back.
them.
Yeah, just throwing them back. So having a regulation for that would, I think, depends on how many people actually do it, and how much they enforce that. And that'd be a difficult one to enforce, you know, honestly, because typically, you know, people going offshore, yeah, they got to have it, but guys fishing around the jetties don't really think about it, and that's just one more thing they're going to have with them in order to properly release those fish.
That
I
happens
don't have one currently, but I intend to get one.
Yeah.
At the Port Aransas jetties, it happens also for people that are standing on the rocks. You know, they're casting out and bringing them up from the bottom. If they're throwing spoons or other things that are working higher up in the water column, it's not a problem. But the ones that get hooked on the bottom do blow up. And, you know, when you're standing on the rocks, how are you going to lower a fish back down to the depths?
Yeah.
When it's bloated.
You
so
almost got to cast it.
You know, there's every one of those laws creates awareness. You know, how it's enforced, whether it does get enforced, is questionable. The game wardens enforcement can't be everywhere all the time. They're spread very thin, but it just lets anglers know that there's a need for that. And if, you know, if a percentage of them adhere to it, it's a good thing.
So if you could change one regulation, and I'll start while you guys are kicking it around. Scott, I'm going to come back to you. If you could change one regulation, and I know they're all hot button issues. I get it. I mean, you know, there's different opinions. That's what it is. That's just the way it is. Mine, Scott, would be the 3 trout limit across the board, everywhere. You have the 3 that you can keep. I just feel like it's too important. You've talked about how bass anglers used to be with that, and now look at the population there. But that would be mine if I could change one. I think you still get your fish. You can still have dinner. You got 2 people on the boat. You got dinner for several people. But that would be mine, Scott. What do you think if you could change one regulation?
Well, you know that has a sunset on it, and it's
I know
coming up in August. I think it's August 23rd or something like that. Is when that one can be reversed coast-wide. I'd like to see them go ahead and hold on to it for a little while. And I don't think our trout are back. They're not recovered from this freeze.
Look who
And
you're
then the
talking
upper
to.
coast, yeah, in the upper coast. I mean, I've heard a lot of complaints up on the upper coast too, and they wish they would have gone to it. I think that they'll probably go ahead and keep that in place for a while. I don't know if they'll make it a permanent deal or how they'll handle that. But I hadn't really heard a whole lot of rumblings about it, honestly, from the folks above. I need to check in with a few people. Are we talking fantasy here?
Hey man,
my fantasy law.
You are the Texas Departments of the Wildlife Department. Yeah, you are the boss.
My fantasy law would be to get rid of burning. If we could stop the burning on the shorelines, my
That's
God,
awesome.
that would make things so awesome. It would be so perfect. But
Mm-hmm.
more realistic, let's make croaker game fish.
Oh, I like that one. I like that one
croaker
a lot.
game fish.
Yeah, because then and we've mentioned it's such a good fish, and it's so depleted.
Yep,
Dean,
and that would fix
ahead,
a lot
Scott.
of things. That would fix several things. Yeah.
Well, I totally agree with the 3 trout. Would like to see us just, hopefully they have some scoping meetings before the sunset and get some public feedback and, kind of let the people have some input on that. And protecting the croaker would be just amazing. That would be, if you protected croaker, you're taking the pressure off the trout in association with protecting another very valuable fish, because the croaker victimized so many speckled trout in the summer. But I don't want to open up that ugly can of worms.
It's too bad it's open.
I really don't,
especially
mind.
down in your neck of the woods.
Here's the crazy thing about the croaker story. Everybody loves to reminisce. Oh, back in the day, I was raised on catching croakers. When I was a kid, my most fondest memory was going out and going croaker fishing. It's the most popular story, but do you talk about it? And then, there's a lot of objection to that. But yeah, and it just makes sense. They should be. And there's so many other items to use for bait out there. And if you want to go out and spend a day catching some fish, you don't have to catch them in 3 casts. You don't have to get your 3 fish in 3 casts and be done in 30 minutes. Put a little effort into it and do that. But the law that I would create, that would be easy. I would make only people with the first name of Dean could fish on Saturday. If I was in charge, then that would just be.
Have somebody at the ramp. What's your name? Let me see your driver's license.
Yes.
There'd be so many name changes.
You can't go. You cannot go today.
Oh man, Dean, you can go, but your buddy can't. Your buddy's got to stay here. Is there anything else? I think Chris Colin just responded 100% on the 3 trout limit, which was my if I were king of the world, the fishing world. But he said 15 to 19 inches. My thing on that was I'll just trust the biologists on that. If it's whatever, 15, 17, 15, 19, whatever.
I wish they would have kept that range in the lower limit, because a 23-inch trout that you can, if their goal was to preserve spawning fish, they would have made that range in the smaller range, because a 23-inch trout is very much mature trout, full of eggs and going to spawn. I understand the Texas Parks and Wildlife, they're in the middle of both sides. They have to balance everything. People want to keep fish, people want to go fishing, but they want more fish to be there. But if the true goal was to preserve the habitat, that range would be lower. And I have said that in the beginning, that if they were going to make some precautions to prevent that, they would have keep it 5, but lower the limit.
Sure.
keep 5, 15, and 16-inch trout, which is going to be the same quantity in fillets or weight of cleaned fish for dinner. And then you're letting the 22s and 23s swim away. So, yeah, I would lower that range and give them back 5 fish.
Scott, what do you think on that? Because you were going to have another thought earlier, and we talked over you.
Yeah, it's just the way they came up with it is spawning biomass. It's the scientific way of doing it. The spawning biomass of the number of smaller fish, and they breed more times throughout the year than the more mature fish. But it can go both ways. I mean, you've got more eggs in a bigger fish, but you got more actual mass of fish in that smaller range. So that's why they were kind of protecting those. And with the freeze, the thought was, I believe, that there were more smaller fish coming up and allow those fish to breed. And let them get 1 or 2 breeding cycles in before they're within the limit of being caught.
And what were your thoughts
science behind it?
And what were your thoughts on croaker? Because I know you had another thought on that.
Yeah, that's what Dean said. Yeah, that's what I remember growing up. We were catching tons of big croaker. The golden croaker run in the fall was epic. It was something everybody looked forward to. We'd go out and sit on Texas City Dike all night long and just catch croaker on dead shrimp and just have an absolute blast. And croaker are hard fighting fish. I mean, throughout the year, we would catch a whole bunch of them on gold spoons too. And they'll hit a lure once they get up to a decent size. And I can't really, I mean, over the last 10 years, maybe caught 2 or 3 that were, what we used to call bull croaker, 1, 2, 3 pounders. That was pretty much a normal thing, a 2 to 3 pound croaker. And they're unicorns now.
I honestly don't think, Dean, a lot of the listeners, let's say under the age of 40, 35, have ever seen a 20-inch croaker.
No.
And I grew up on them. I remember telling the story not long ago. Well, it's been about a year now where I caught one in the back lake. I thought it was a redfish. And then I thought it was a drum when I saw it. And I pulled it out. I was like, holy crap, that's a giant croaker. I haven't seen one of those since I was a kid. I mean, it was a monster croaker. People don't realize how good a fish that is. And I don't think people remember that's even possible.
And it was good family fun. I mean, that is how you bring the next generation into fishing. If you can take the kids out and they can be entertained and, not listen to dad about why you can't catch no fish out here today, and the kids, they want to go throw rocks at something. But that was just, and everybody from our generation, our age, was brought into the fishing culture with that experience. I mean, fishing was, I ain't gonna say it was easy, but it was an opportunity. It was another opportunity for bank fishermen, for everybody to go out with the kids. And then you're catching things, that you could have a nice little dinner with, and you go home, and it was just a good family fun experience. But there's pressure on the resource. I mean, I could go on forever, from water quality, from industry, from just the amount of people on the water. Plus we catch them for bait and sell them by the thousands and thousands of dozens every weekend, where there is a multifaceted attack on the resource. And a lot of those things have attributed to the demise of the croaker.
It has, and I think that's a perfect lead in to our next topic that we're going to get to here in just a second. Okay, so glad you mentioned that, Dean. I don't know how real this is. Scott will know. He's always plugged into so many people. And by the way, on the whole croaker and trout limit conversation, et cetera, I get messages, Scott. I know you do, Dean. I know you do, from people, at high levels in Texas Parks and Wildlife and CCA and et cetera, et cetera. They watch and listen to our podcast. So hopefully there'll be at least some influence, the more people that get on board with that. But this is one that I saw just this week. The Texas Open Beaches Act from 1959. Apparently there is not, again, I don't know if it's going to pass, but there's a Senate bill that says that's going to define the boundaries of the public beach and would allow the upland beachfront property owners to make the determination of how accessible beaches are. And Dean, I'm going to start with you because you and I, not too long ago, had this conversation. You were commenting on all the houses. You just talked about the pressure, but you were telling me about all the houses you see now on up and down the coast, especially down where you are. And that limits, especially if this bill passes, what I used to do, what I'm sure you and Scott used to do, my dad and I, when we were a kid, we'd go down to the beach or we'd go down an access road and we just start, look for stuff and start fishing. That's limited now already and could get more limited. I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't think it's the residential people that are going to be challenging this law. It's the hotels, it's the condos, it is beachfront corporations that want those beaches.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want people migrating in front of their hotel umbrellas.
That's a good point.
So that's where it's been challenged in the past. Those are the people that have lost in court to the Texas Open Beaches Act, where hotels and condos that do not want people invading their space. And, the citizens of Texas have fought very long and hard to keep that.
It's from 1959.
They have battled this in the past. And, Texans love the great outdoors. If you want to see people unite, then, tell them you can't go on this beach. You will get more public outcry and a unified voice against that. Hopefully it stays that way, but you're battling big money, and big money has a way to get things done at times. But the residentials, like all the houses that are being built, Cinnamon Shores and all those down Port Aransas is going to be connected to Corpus Christi in a few short years. And I don't think the residential people are the ones that are wanting to possess the beach. The people who are going to battle that in court are going to have way more money and big time lawyers that can out-lawyer. They can outspend the opposition. And if it is lost, that's where it'll happen. That'll be the first stone that tumbles will be the hotels.
Scott, my mind immediately went to introduction of fishing to the younger generation. That's where we all started, is beachfront. I know there's still going to be piers and jetties and all that stuff, but man, that was fun. And that was a great introduction. It kind of ties in with the whole podcast of the croaker and opening opportunities for people. But my mind went to, boy, that's going to would really limit just the access for younger people.
There's already quite a few places along Galveston Island that you can't go on anymore. I mean, I don't know how they get away with it. I don't know the way the law is set up for that. But growing up, I've talked about Frankie on here before. We talked about him with the flounder. One of my girlfriends, her dad, he had a VW Bug, and that was our beach mobile. And he set up the whole front trunk on a VW Bug. He had it set up where we could use it as an ice chest. And we just prowled the beaches and caught tons of trout and just threw them in the trunk in the front in the ice. And
we would just nose our car right up to the front. Yeah.
I mean, that was a lot of fun. I mean, we'd ride up and down the beach all the way up and down Galveston and on down towards Freeport, and I miss those days of just cruising up and down the beach and stopping and being able to get into a bunch of trout. But like Dean said, it's going to be money. It's developers, and they got the money. They can put the money in those political action committees and basically pay it off. That's what unfortunately, that's the way our government runs at all levels, is who's got the money and who can get you reelected. And you pay somebody to get reelected, and then they kind of do what you want them to do. And
it's funny how that works out.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Funny how that works out. I do want to mention the right website, the new website for the knock and tail lures, which are fantastic, and we were playing with a lot of different ones this past weekend. It is knockandtaillures.com. Knockandtaillures.com. I used to give you another website. Forget it. You can purchase on there. It's pretty snazzy. And of course, he has Mike has. We were talking about Mike on the boat. He's a really good dude. I'd highly recommend the lure Bite Me 20 BITEME20. Same thing. Speaking of which, our guy Tim, who I just have a blast with, and we're going to take Jason out next time. For him, it's Bite Me 20 BITEME20 at coastalfishinggear.com. And Dean, you got hooked up with some Wade Wright stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been using their gear for a couple years now, and the Wade sling is awesome. And for me personally, I like to travel light. I mean, I have just the basic gear, and it has, when you step out of the boat, it's just, I mean, it has
just
your
right there. I use that like when I'm wading, I'll use that. If it's a quick wade, or if I'm like on the jetties or something, it's great for the jetties.
Yeah. And you spin it around, it's kind of on your back and the side, and it's not in the way of casting. And I mean, I can't step out without it anymore, man. It is just a well thought out product and high quality. It is rugged. I mean, I just throw it in the boat. Get my hands on. And it sets in the sun. It's rugged straps and the clips. Everything on it is tough, My buddy that I fish with, GOJ, he calls me gear tester because I break everything.
Scott, that's your nickname too, I think.
We put it to the test. And man, if I have something like that I've been fishing with 2 or 3 years and it's still going with me, that's high quality stuff, man.
Yeah. I was using the belt this past weekend because I was throwing the kitchen sink, but I generally like the sling as well. All right, we're going to get to what would Scott do and what would Dean do here in just a second. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this because I think it's something that we're all familiar with. But I do want to say this, Scott. There's this story out there, and we had the question on the Bite Me group page, which I highly encourage everybody to join the group page. You can ask these questions and message us, etc. about this. What is it? 1,000 mile, 5,000 mile, whatever it is, line of sargassum that is moving out and moving into the Gulf. Well, I dug in a little bit. I sent you guys the link. It sounds like Texas is going to get your whatever air quote normal amount of sargassum. It's not going to be the full like the full Monty, so to speak, of all that. It's just like a kind of splinter off of the big portion, but it's still going to affect fishing. It's still going to affect beaches, Scott.
I like it when we have a good weed year. It makes for some good fishing. You get out there, you can find some cobia, find triple tail, all kind of dolphin. Little baby dolphin get in there, and that stuff is full of life. If you ever get out there, that's one of the great things to do with kid trips is when things slow down, the fishing is not all that great. Things are, my kids used to love to do it. In fact, my oldest called it sargassum weed for the longest time.
Yeah,
she
named after
she couldn't get sargassum, so it was sargassum weed, and so I'd reach reach over the side of the boat and just grab a big handful of it and shake it on the front end of the boat. And there's shrimp and crabs and little fish and all kind of stuff that falls out of it that spends their whole life in it. I mean, they're camouflaged in such a way that you can't even see them when they're in the water. And that's what brings all the fish around them. So I don't mind having a good amount of it. You get on some of those weed lines and just kind of use your trolling motor on a calm day and just ease up and down it. And you'll see all kind of fish up underneath there. And it makes it a pain if you're big into trolling, because it will hang on everything. And the guys who really hate it are the beach fishermen, the shark guys on the beach. Because as soon as you get your line set, then a big old wad of it comes along, grabs a hold of your line, and just
size of a basketball you're reeling in.
Oh yeah, it's a mess. And trolling, we used to, you'd have to designate somebody to check the lines, constantly for getting hung up on the weeds. But it's actually a good thing though, environmentally. It makes a mess on the beach. It stinks. It's nasty. But when it does pile up, when they clean the beaches, they just push it up into the sand dunes, and that holds more sand. That makes better dunes, bigger sand dunes, and that's more protection on hurricanes. So it's just part of nature. Some people don't like it, but it's part of what's going to happen.
Dean, we're going to get hit pretty good. Like I said, it's not going to be the big blob, but we're going to get hit pretty good. You guys get it pretty good down there, of course.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Scott said everything about it. It brings fish. It brings life. Whenever the beach goers are hating life because it's piled up, it's good for fishing. I mean, it comes in the pass. It brings in tons of fish. The kingfish at the end of the jetties are just amazing when the sargassum is here. So the last couple of years, the kingfishing has been not really that fast and furious as it has been in the past, but it's just clean, empty water. That's when the sargassum shows up, there's bait balls, there is life, there's just fish that come with that stuff. So I love it. And for all of the struggles of trolling, that it does cause, man, if you can troll around it and have one of them days where you can run a little diver next to that stuff, it's automatic kingfish hookup. And I mean, we do a lot of that in July and August. So I love it. And I was looking at the radar on that link, and it was kind of interesting. I read there's a lot of bird life issues. The birds feed on the fresh stuff that comes in, but there were other issues with the stuff that lays there decomposing. It was detrimental to turtles. So, there's a flip side.
Yeah, the sea turtles can't lay their egg, or they lay their eggs in it and then it gets washed out or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, there's pros and cons, but definitely it's
I love it. I love it when it's here. When the beach goers are crying, the fishermen are happy.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get you. What would Scott do? What would Dean do? Don't forget RSL Roofing and Ironworks in San Antonio. Have a lot of listeners down in San Antonio area. Book a minimum $5,000 trip, and they're going to take care of the listeners. Everybody takes care of the Bite Me listeners if they're a part of this show. You book that minimum $5,000 job trip with Dean, Scott, or Caleb, and they're going to take care of the tip for you on that. All right, Scott, you were no help last weekend. You were no help, at least not to me. So the pressure's on, Scott. What does it look like this weekend? What would Scott do? It certainly wasn't my fault, I can tell you that.
Dude, I mean, it's all over the place again. We got this hellacious north wind right now. It's going to continue into tomorrow. Then it starts swinging more east, and it turns southeast, and then it's like due south on Friday and just cooking the whole entire time. I'm supposed to fish on Friday. I got bad news for that fellow. We were going to be fly fishing and poling and fly fishing, and it's showing 23 gusting to 37 Friday morning.
That's Friday?
So, yeah, and he said, well, I could go Thursday evening. Well, Thursday evening is 20 gusting to 27, so that's not a big help. But for the weekday challenge folks out there that we'd like to usually make fun of because it's windy on weekends, Saturday is
Mhm.
awesome. Saturday's southeast, less than 10, stays that way pretty much all day long. Got a little cloud covers, mid 70s. Probably going to have some pretty high tides, I would imagine, after all that that 37-mile-an-hour southeast wind is going to push a lot of water in. I would think back lakes, all the flooded grass, all the flooded shorelines that we talked about last week, same kind of deal. Get up in there and start prowling around. Do what Dean did, get out on a big open flat that's normally super shallow and it's hard to get up on with your boat. You could drift those, and you got a lot more water to work with. It's that time of year where we're in the 70s on the water temperatures, and things should be kicking off pretty good. I don't know why you sucked.
Hey, I'm the one that's supposed to say that. Tomorrow's another day. Dean, how about down on the lower coast? The winds aren't going to be much different. I was just looking at your area, but what would you do, and specifically, Friday, Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, and the timing has been great for the weekenders lately. I mean, this past weekend was amazing. Coming up, it looks really good. But, just like what I said in the beginning of the show, all of those options are good. If you can find a shoreline that's somewhat protected, wade fishing is going to be great. When the wind's blowing and I can get somewhere and step out of the boat, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it's not as difficult whenever you're walking and casting in the wind. Controlling the boat and drifting and, being specific with your cast is real tough. But, if you've got a southeast wind and you have your favorite wade fishing spot that's somewhat protected where it's at your back, I mean, it's going to be good. And even Thursday is not too terrible. I mean, it's 10, 12 in the morning and going to get a little breezy in the afternoon, but that's a normal day for us around here. I mean, we fish in 20-mile-an-hour wind, starting around 11 or noon, just about every day. So if you can get where you want to be and have the wind at your back, but it is shifting in many different directions this week. It's going to be a lot of what I dealt with this past weekend. So, the high tide, even if you're kayaking, the high tide is very beneficial in the wind because you can use those shorelines. The low tide and big wind, that's the kiss of death. I mean, you end up in the open flats and you're at the mercy of the wind. So, but I mean, whether you're wading or drifting, it's going to be decent, be a little challenging for the kayakers out there, but the high tide can bail that out. So, Thursday's good. The weekend looks amazing, man. Weekend should be a lot of people out there having fun in the sun. And it's that time of year where the water temperature is warm, even though the wind is north and south and east and west, the water temperature is just slowly creeping up. And all the little shrimp are hatching out, the little crabs are there. It's that time of year where they start to get in a better mood on a day-to-day basis. It's not timing it in between fronts. It's not waiting 3 or 4 days afterwards. So in spite of the wind, every day has really good options.
So Scott, as Ray pointed out on the text message, are we sure that Dean was looking at the right forecast?
Yes.
Yeah. He's saying 10 to 12 where he is. I'm showing 18 to 25 Thursday morning.
Which on Thursday I got 10
and
mile
again,
an hour,
Dean looks at like 6 different ones and then he picks
the one that's the best. Yeah.
And I use Port Aransas because it's on the beachfront. It even is the windier. Yeah. It's more realistic to the water. If you use Aransas Pass, because it's on the back side of the bay, it's always lighter. So I look at the Port A beach wind and it gives me a more realistic approach to what's happening on the water. But yes, Thursday morning, I got 10 mile an hour east southeast with the maximum of about 17.
Maybe I need to come down there then, because mine ain't looking like that.
But who can trust the weather that many days out. You know,
Yeah.
that's some voodoo magic. You could shake a bloody chicken foot over your iPad and it'll change. It'll magically change for tomorrow.
You can do what? You can do what? I can honestly say I've never shaken a bloody chicken foot over my laptop. I've never done that.
That's a voodoo. That's voodoo magic.
On that note, we'll move on. Dean, slowrideguide.com. What else is happening in your life?
Oh man, I'm in my fishing groove right now. Deer season is behind me. Everything is done, so it's all about fishing now. So looking forward to things getting past April.
And your videos are hopping.
Yeah, the video's been great. We ended the season, so we had 22 episodes that we did in a real short time, and my videographer producer has been living in Miami for 2 months, and when he gets back, we're going to crank up a whole new season. So here's my idea I got. So me and Scott, we were talking about this. Actually, it came up in conversation on the website about putting the fishing school into an online program. So the fishing school that we did in the classroom, it was before the age of the internet, and we had safety, we had tides and terrain, we had gear selection. There were like 6 portions of the class. I'm going to create an episode for each one of those portions. I still have the syllabus. I still have the all of that data, and I was going to put it together, whether I used a projector or just a whiteboard, and I'm going to put the fishing school into some YouTube episodes.
That's awesome.
That's what I was going to do while my producer is out of town.
Well, good deal. Scott, anything happening in your world? Of course, we need everybody to go to scottnullphotography.com to get some Bite Me gear, hats, stickers, shirts, etc. And also some great prints like the one that's behind you for those that can see us on the YouTube channel. But what else is happening with you?
Just being me, man. Just doing my thing out here. Trying to finish this house up. I want to get this house built before the tarpon season really kicks off. I don't think it's going to happen exactly, but I'm spending all these windy days doing fun things like laying concrete today. You know,
got that AC unit coming.
Yeah, got some things happening around here, trying to get it all wrapped up tidy so that I can have a good summer out there. Something that came along from Mr. Hughes Andrew, he was apparently listening to you on your real job today. And so if you believe that weatherman, I think you have another think coming. Is that
that is correct? You have another think coming. This is the lesson for the day, and then we'll call it a show. So it came up on my radio show. Somebody said, if you think this, then you got another thing coming. And I said, all right. I said, all right, let's get real here now. The term is you have another think coming with a K, not thing. And everybody always misuses that. And my co-host, who's, occasionally not exactly first to the party, always said thing, and he challenges me. And I was like, no, I had a professor just drill that into my head. The proper way do y'all say think or thing?
Thing.
It's think. You've got another think coming with a K. Now, both of them have become acceptable in day-to-day vernacular, but the proper way to say it, and a lot of people don't know this, is you've got another think coming.
Well, according to Hughes, Judas Priest would disagree with you on your perspective.
Those notable grammarians, Judas Priest, those and heaven forbid that they use bad grammar and spelling on an album cover.
Yes. Well, I mean, that was what Hughes was using. Yeah, he also wanted to know how you like that tranks.
Incorrect. What are you looking it up?
Google says you have another think coming.
Think is correct. See there? You got another think coming. See, this is a full
highly educational program.
We're here for you. Scott Null, you're the best. Captain Dean, you're the best. I suck. but that's going to change this week. I promise you. You guys catch them up. Appreciate you joining us. We'll talk to you next time. No, that is correct.
The things
You didn't
I
know it was
learned.
stink? You
Well,
didn't know it was stink?
my stream had cut out for like 30 minutes. Your Odyssey app sucks, but
Yeah, I
it
know,
had cut
I
out for a
know.
little bit.